also, no matter how effective we're trying to be with our message and how relevant, if the people who need to hear it, if we don't have access to them, then the
Mm-hmm.
prophetic preaching thing is not really what we think it is. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm finding that engaging topics like these is giving my church access. I called a lawyer. I'm sorry, I'm taking all the time, guys. Let me hurry up and get through this. I called a lawyer that I had met in what do you call it? The homeowners association meeting where my church is. So
Okay.
where my church, the
Right.
community where my church is located, I go and attend the
Mm-hmm.
homeowners association in that area. Young lady was running for judge. Got to
Mm-hmm.
talk to her. She wanted to come by the church. I got her name and number. I called her to see if she wanted to come and hang out when we did this thing on crime and social justice. She could not come, but she gave me the number to another lawyer, one of the top lawyers in the state, criminal defense lawyers.
Come on now, preacher.
Talked to her on the phone. She
Talk
told
to
me her
us.
story, powerful story. And just being able to now connect and to meet people in the community to do things like this. Yeah, we got to find, I agree with the brethren and the sister last week that we have to be intentional about finding ways to get in the room so that when it comes to people who are making policy that is unjust or that is unjust, when it comes to people who are making the decisions that affect the people in our communities, we have to have done something to gain some influence to gain their ears so that we can say something and speak to those issues.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, just sitting behind the cloistered walls of our churches and in our own individual
Not going to make a
silos,
difference. Yeah.
yeah,
Right,
nobody
right,
And
right.
cares.
But listen, doesn't that take away from what we our comfortability that we want to just we know the last days are coming and we want to just hunker down and get ready. I mean, there are a lot of churches who are not comfortable in getting out there.
Boring. Ooh.
I like what you said, man. Come on, Raj. Come with it,
Hey,
Raj. I love
I'm
it.
just being honest.
Yeah.
We're struggling with that. My president has placed on the top docket. One of our pastors was with that group that you talked about, Dion, that talked
Troy.
about getting out of it. Troy,
Pastor
yeah, Troy
Troy
Brand.
Brand. Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah.
He's
He
good.
talked about the church that got 4 million. Our conference received a grant. We're putting out a press release pretty soon. You heard it first here on Pastors Roundtable. We received a grant for $250,000 for rural and small churches
Love it.
and developing training opportunities and how we're going to get the members together to grow. And it's more and it's wide open, and we got a lot
Yeah.
of rural churches in South Central. So the money is coming, the money is flowing, but the
Yeah.
money doesn't come because we tend to
Ask the
be kind of
conference.
isolated.
Yeah.
We got to be. We tend to be very isolated in how we do church these days.
Hey, Roger, money doesn't
Yeah.
come because we asked the conference. Evangelism fund. Listen, no, you're right on it, Raj. Listen, the money is there. I mean, especially and as Anselm, as you were talking about, just engaging with the civic leaders and then having a space in the room, sitting at the table. That's what the Center for Community Change is all about.
Good.
Like what you're saying to me is exactly what they're trying to echo. That look, the church is beyond the four wall. Listen, I'm the pastor of Central Florida.
Yes.
That's
Come
that.
on.
I mean,
Yes.
that's
Yes.
my. You know what I mean. Now I
Yes.
happen to share it with some other
Yes.
pastors, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm the pastor. So when we do these things, we're engaged in the community. We have a seat at the table, and then now we influence folk for the kingdom of God, right? So just the other day, last a couple weeks ago was a Martin Luther King Day, and so what I was privileged to do in my previous
And
district,
he
I was.
brushed us off for that. You notice that he didn't want to hang with us as a team. He went out there and did
Yeah,
I hope he's not going
so
to say he went and marched in a parade
no. I was, no.
because I'm
So
about
in
to
my
blow that up in a minute
previous
here. Yeah.
district, in my previous district, I was the Martin Luther King breakfast chair, right? And so
Okay.
that's the person that brings people together and the program and all that stuff. And so we brought a lot of Adventists to that function where they weren't there before. When I came into this area, that's something I wanted to do. I said, listen, I want to do a Martin Luther King breakfast. And so I partnered with the hospital, Advent Health, and we made it happen. We had people from all over. We had a lot of people. We went to the Catholic Church there. They opened up their facility. But the point is engaging with the pastors, engaging with commissioners, engaging
Yeah.
with the sheriff department. So now, when we go and we go and we probably going to do a youth initiative or something like that, people know us. We're mingling with each other. We're providing some type of ministry for folk, and that is a part of the gospel. That's a part of the gospel. So what you're doing, Pastor Paul, man, I applaud you, man. What you're doing, Pastor Wade, sitting at the seat, man, getting this information, pouring it out to the churches, letting the people know this press release. See, a lot of times, people really don't know that the sky is really the limit because they never hear anything. So they just operate in the box. They act like they have to clock in and clock out. But when they hear the press release, when they hear, hey, look, the conference is getting this grant and some other people are getting the grant, then they're like, hey, maybe I can do it too. By the way, some
Yeah.
people are against getting grants. They're against
Mm.
getting money from the government. They say, I'm not getting money from the government. And that's a whole nother conversation,
I
Pastor Paul.
yeah, I was gonna say I heard Elon Musk was against getting uh, okay. I said his name.
Oh man, you're in trouble now. But listen, then I just read today that the United States president is setting up an office of faith in the White House.
Come talk to us, Claudia. I, Claudia was on talking some other stuff. Yeah, we need Claudia to come talk to us about this stuff, man.
And it is this thing is moving. This thing, first of all, Dion, I think Dr. Henry, as you shared, getting into those spaces are important. But I think key, and Pastor Paul, you mentioned it, and I think we glossed over it. You sit at your neighborhood meeting. That's key. Plenty of us,
Listen,
we're in churches that are just commuting in and out of the community,
watch
and
this.
we
Oh,
really
first of all,
don't know. Well,
I know I said, first of all, I just want to do a shout out to my former member, Sister Claudia Henry. I just want to shout out there. That's all I want to say. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah. But wait, when I
thought
say
it
my
was a
neighborhood
I
meeting,
thought it was a family member at first,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
no,
Yeah, I read the
because,
name wrong. I thought it was Claudia Allen, and I know Claudia
no,
Allen had done some stuff on
no,
this stuff. That's
that's
what I
my
was saying. She had to come talk to
Right.
us. But you
so
come
Roger.
talk to us too, Claudia Henry.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Roger,
So
when you
the thing
said
is,
sit
yeah,
at the
how do
neighborhood
we?
place,
Huh?
when you said sitting down with like those neighborhood meetings, the
Yeah.
HOA meeting, I sat in one. And I got mad. I got upset, man, because
Why?
so I wasn't
Why?
I
You
wasn't a
weren't
good
doing
witness.
enough.
Man. I felt like if I said something, I wasn't going to be a good witness, man, because they talk about these things that they're going to do. I said, "Come on, man! Come on, man!" I'm sorry, Roger. Go ahead, man. I cut you off. Go ahead. Now.
Well,
Go
no,
ahead.
maybe it got you. It should have gotten you excited to do something. But I'm just sharing that a lot of our churches don't even think about just being on the neighborhood group. You know, we think we got to go all the way downtown to City Hall, but if we just get in the neighborhood group, if we get to understand, when I was pastoring in New York City, that there was a whole hierarchy how the neighborhood gets to the City Hall. That these neighborhood watch groups are literally like neighborhood districts within a city hall conglomerate where the groups in the neighborhood talk directly to the representative
Right,
at City
right,
Hall.
right,
And we don't have to try to get to City Hall. We just need to sit on our neighborhood watch groups.
Yeah.
These guys from the City Hall, they come to these groups to get what their residents are talking about. And if we as an organization can sit in these places, we can tap into funding that's coming, initiatives that are coming, and be able to speak directly to it. Just simply being a part of the neighborhood group.
yeah. That goes a long way in many different ways. When I've noticed that when I go and sit in on these meetings, I used to do it when I was in Delray as well, my previous district as well. And I remember when I showed up at that first community meeting, um, after the very first time, they asked me to come and moderate the mayoral debate um, uh, in town. It's like I was in the room. You show
Yeah.
up, and that's one of the things.
Wow.
Hey,
Pastors show up, be in the room.
yes,
Um,
yes,
like
yes.
there was a mayoral debate. They said, look, we need somebody to moderate the debate, and you sound like you speak well. And that they didn't know me, but I showed up, and it,
Yeah, listen, yes. Pastor Paul, you just said something right there. Look, I remember pastoring in one district, and Pastor Barron was in that district,
mhm.
and he just said to me one day, he said, "Listen, man, just go on down to the association meeting. Just go on down over there. I mean, you just." I said, "Okay." So where do they mean that? Okay. Man, listen, I went to the association meeting. Right, I'm talking about the what do you call it, the pastors association meeting, interdenominational. I went into that room, Pastor Paul, Pastor Wade, and
Walked out
after
the
I was
president.
done, I became the president, man, for 2 years, man, or 3 years. I just gave it up to somebody. I said, "Listen, I can't hog this thing." I became not only the president, they put me on the Cancer Society board. I was on the board. Not only the Cancer Society board they put me on, I was doing like the Martin Luther King, the this and that. Man, I had like several, to the point where we were doing a meeting. We were doing a meeting right there in Avon Park. We said, "Look, we're going to do old school." I know some people say, "I'm not going to do a meeting like that. I'm not going to do a tent meeting," but we did. We went old school. We said we're going to do a tent meeting on the church's property. The people said, what are you talking about?" So we were doing this meeting. Now, in the city, you could only do a tent function for 1 week. We needed 3 weeks. So I went to the city council and I said, "Hey, we want to do 3 weeks." And because I was known in the community, because they knew it, they said, "We got to get Pastor Henry those 3 weeks, man. Let him just do it." And hey, and then we baptized like 30 people. So we praise
Wonderful.
God
Come
right
on.
there in the
Yeah,
community.
yeah,
Come
yeah,
on.
yeah.
So yes,
And
come
listen,
on.
listen. I wanna address something too, Dion. That I think some people may hear what you just said about you went in the first meeting and you ended up being the president. And there are some people who would say, well, that all that means is that that nobody else wanted to do it, and so they just gave it to the new guy, and they just gave you the. And I'm like, bring it. So what?
Right. Yeah,
Even
yeah,
if that is true, you're there now. You have an opportunity that you did not have before. And just because
Right.
maybe the predecessor or previous folk didn't want it or didn't do anything with it or didn't make
yeah.
it, effective or whatever, doesn't mean that you can come in there and so there's just power. And we're talking about this as pastors,
Hmm.
but we just elected in Fort Lauderdale. So the mayor, the former mayor of the county, phone conversation, we were talking. He says to me, he says, "Yeah, there's another Seventh-day Adventist young lady who we're trying to get in to be the city manager." Um,
Come on, preacher.
was telling me about the type of support that he thought that she had. And then I saw one of our colleagues post something on his page, one of his stories, about somebody being a city manager. And I looked real close, and then I text my mayor guy, and I said, "Is this the girl you were talking about?" He said, "Yeah." And I didn't know her. She's not my point is, she's not a pastor,
Right.
but she's in the room. And so for our members who are listening, who are saying, "Yeah, it's only pastors who can be in the room and they have the
No,
impact and the influence."
no.
No, there's a
Listen.
Seventh-day Adventist who is the manager of Fort Lauderdale, Florida now,
Come on.
one of the largest cities in the nation, Fort Lauderdale,
Come
Florida.
on.
Listen,
Wow.
you got so the power of being in the room. Now,
Oh, and
obviously,
and it's Black History Month too. I'm just
oh yeah,
I guess
I
gotta
love it.
throw
I,
that out
I
there.
love how you did this, man.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's a power of being in the room. Opportunities come now naturally, and then I come back to my. I mean, they didn't elect me the first day, right? I had to stay in the room for a little while, right?
Yeah.
You go work your way up in the room, right? But when they see someone that is eager, somebody that has just drop a couple of ideas, they will promote you, and they will, and I'm telling you, and they will support you. Being in the room, and I think it goes back to Roger's point, what Roger mentioned just a while ago, that, and you were alluding to this, that sometimes we're so heavenly minded that we're no earthly good. Meaning,
Mm.
we're so focused now on the last days that we don't want to be a part of bringing people in the last days. I think
Right.
we need to take another look. Jesus is coming soon. We see what's, and we've been talking about this for years, but and it's not a show talking about what's happening, challenging even the Constitution now strongly. It's not a show talking about those things.
I want to talk about that.
But okay, all right. Well, we can go there. But what I would say to you is this:
Mm.
if there's ever a time to be in the room, the time is right now.
Yeah.
Right now, making a difference, telling people that Jesus is coming soon. I'll leave you with this, and I'll turn over to you, Anthony, if you want to say something. Look, these Waldensians, what they would do, they're going to school. Some of them going to school, Italy and France. They're in the room, but guess what they did? They were winning people to Christ.
Yeah, yeah,
Winning people to
yeah.
Christ. The Waldensians. I'm talking about the group from Peter Waldo. Waldensians, man. And so we got to be in the room. We got to be in the room.
Listen, we in light of what we're facing as a country now, in terms of the leadership that we have in the presidency, it just goes to show that anybody can get in the room. I'm just gonna leave it right there. Anybody can get in the room. But we have to realize, a lot of us are talking about it. I remember when in November 6th, I had some friends who said, "Hey, you can come on over to Canada." People are thinking about leaving, think people are doing all sorts of stuff. But then, I preached a message a couple of weeks ago that God always has somebody in the city.
Mercy.
He always has somebody. He always has somebody in the city. I brought out the point. I remember coming up, being as conservative coming through the ranks as conservative as I am. There's always this talk about, and I love it now. Love the fact that we can do things in places that we never thought we can do things before. Even in the space we're in right now, this was not something we would have done on a Friday night. Being on air, streaming, sharing, talking, engaging. No, Friday night this was not the plan. But in these last days, we need to execute in places that we never were before. We have been invited in. The young lady who's now the city manager of Fort Lauderdale. We have councilwomen, folks who are on the city councils in small towns. We have representatives in high office who are the chaplain of the Senate. We're in places that we would have never have been had we kind of kept insulated in our own thinking and trying to keep the world out.
Yeah.
We've got to get in the world. We have to get there and connect and be with family members and be with friends and do and say and speak for God in places that if we don't speak, who's going to speak? Oh yeah, that's right. The rocks will cry out.
Mercy. I don't want a rock crying out for me.
No,
No,
sir. No, sir.
let those rocks stay there, brother. Listen.
So
Um,
are we gonna be able to talk about stuff for real, or
amen.
Yeah, if you want to.
I mean, I can listen.
But listen, let's
Hey,
put a
you
shape.
didn't get a letter? You didn't
We
get a
want to
letter,
let
Angela?
our listeners and those who will be viewing in the replay know that we're just so excited. Season 10, could you imagine,
Yeah.
of the Pastors Roundtable? What a
Okay.
testimony to what God has done for a ministry that was just we thought, hey, let's get together and have a conversation. Look what God has done. 10 seasons. average season about 15 to 16 shows. When we first started, we were doing what, 30 shows, in
Hey,
a
it
season.
was that was
It was
something else, man.
eternal. It was eternal.
When we first got
But
started,
we
yeah.
are starting off season 10. And so we want to give our viewers who are here tonight and those who will be watching, put in the chat, email us, let us know what you would like us to speak about in season 10. We still have a few slots available. We want to tap into so many things. So much has happened. One of the biggest things that we're seeing, even as a pastor, we want to talk about ministry and how ministry and structure comes together. And some of the things our pastors are facing is how do we plan for the future, particularly retirement. How do we plan for our families? How do we, how can churches help us do that?
Mm.
That's something we want to tap into. So we have a show planned for that. We have a show planned about pastors burnout.
And things
A
keep
lot of our
going how
pastors
things
are
are going
burning
right now. Ain't nobody retiring. That I
out.
think a lot of our folk are thinking like, look, we see this stuff is going down. We done read these Ellen White books and prophecy, and we know what Revelation 13 and 14 and all that stuff says. And as we see this stuff happening, people are like, okay, mm, yeah. Well, what about some of this stuff? And I think we've got to address and we've got to talk to our people about some of these things. And that's not to say that and I see some things coming up, GC session in 2025. I'm not saying that everything is all gloom and doom and whatnot, but
No.
but we serve. But Dion and I pastor down in Florida. Huge immigrant populations that we
Yes.
serve down here that are feeling a whole lot of some kind of way right now.
Yeah.
Anselm,
Uh,
Anselm.
mhm.
One of my members went to a particular store, big grocery store. This is a store that sells, our stuff, man. Oh, Roger, you too. The green banana, yam,
Okay.
pumpkin, all that. Big store. It's a good store. And I'm not gonna say the store, its name, but usually it is full. He went there Friday, 12 noon. He said only 3 people were in the store.
Crickets.
Oh my.
Now the store usually has a lot of Hispanics there, but now he went there Friday noon. Only 3 people were in the store. So when you
Mhm.
said people are afraid, Pastor Paul, yes,
It's real.
something is happening. 3 people in
Real.
the store, like, come on
And
now.
I would suggest that there are people who are saying things like, well, if people are here legally, they shouldn't be afraid. They don't have anything to be afraid of. Like, well, tell that to the people that we're hearing that are getting picked up, who are not just here legally, but were born here. Um,
Right.
that you know, and then the whole concept of removing um, birthright citizenship. That's another thing that makes people be a little bit afraid. Well,
Mhm.
if they're going to remove, and I know the details. The details are it would be like from here going forward, or from whenever they pass it, and it does it passes the injunction of the courts and all that. But it doesn't matter. There is a real fear, no matter what the actual details are. Um, that those real fears impact how people interface with each other, with the
Right.
church, and with God. And so,
Right.
as a community of faith, these are not things that will do for us just to overlook, or just to tell people just to get over it, or to look at them and say, we don't care about your circumstances and situations. You should have come here legally. So just, and it's we're not trying to circumvent the law. That's not what I'm promoting, or whatever. But the idea of having a heart and an ear and an ability to be able to empathize and sympathize with people in their circumstances. Um, I think the church has to do a better job at developing an ear to be able to hear and to listen in ways that are meaningful and that are impactful, and that, Dion, as you said, ultimately uplifts Jesus and lets people see a Jesus who cares, a Jesus who is a provider and a protector.
So listen, you two, both of you pastor local churches, particularly in Florida. What has anything surfaced at this point that you have had to think about? Maybe you haven't enacted it to counter the conversation that's out there. Have you, as a church, have you all began to think about how does this thing impact you, or your members or your community or even your outreach? Has that come up in conversation yet?
I,
Yes,
I would
very
say
much.
this,
Yeah.
that we and I don't have my letter here, but our conference has been very, very efficient. And so there was some communication that was sent out to some local leaders, kind of giving some guidelines based on, of course, you know, our beliefs and also the law. And it was really good, but I don't have it here, so I can't really quote them specifically. But I would say that I see that a lot of, especially our leaders in our conference, you have compassion, and that is a good thing. They
Mm,
also understand, the laws of the land, of course, right? But and what people are doing, but that compassion and having compassion even within the existing laws can really help churches to
mm.
kind of safeguard, these things from happening, at least within the local church. So, I'm very pleased with what our conference is doing, especially
Yeah.
specifically at my church. We haven't had anything as of yet that causes any alarm from the members that come to the church so far. We do have a community distribution program, and there's nothing as of yet that we see that has impacted that. But we are still praying, and we're still looking for ways so that we can make sure that we do the best that we can to safeguard the individuals that are attending, or individuals that are being ministered to within the
Mhm.
guidelines that are.
Got you.
Yeah,
Got you.
in my church, we've had several conversations in different contexts on it. First of all, I think our union was very, very proactive in
Yeah.
sending a packet out to all of us to distribute to our employees, to our teachers, and to our members. That was somewhat of a guideline of how to interact or interface with authorities should there be any cause or reason to. And I think that was helpful, and we made that available to our members. Um, had a long discussion in our prayer meeting the other night, and one of the things that I shared with my members that I want to share with our audience is that I said, look, if you have family members or friends that you know who have a visa that is about to expire, encourage them to get it updated or to go home.
Mm,
Mm,
mm.
That sounded like, I said, if we need to raise some money to help somebody get on a plane and go home, because if they overstay that visa, um, and then they get picked up, what are we learning? What we're
Yes.
hearing now is that they're opening a tent camp in Guantanamo Bay. We heard that there's
yes.
a contract with El Salvador, where it's the
Mm,
largest prison system in the world, where they house people from MS-13 and some of the most vicious people in the world. The El Salvadorian government has said, "Send us your illegal immigrants, and we will house them here." Like they're not saying so. So what am I saying? I'm saying there is the potential that if you get picked up and you've overstayed your visa, that they're not putting you on a plane and sending you home.
oh no, no,
They
no.
they may be sending you to Guantanamo Bay. They may be sending you to a foreign country. By the way, the news reports were also saying that they would send American citizens, um, just for criminals or violent criminals to go and be prison in the prison system in El Salvador as well. So I did a little research on it. Man, you if any of you go and do some research on the prison system in El Salvador, um,
Mm,
yeah, if you have a loved one and their visa is still good, but they don't have long on it, please, family, hear me.
yes.
Please encourage them to go home and get that visa extended or whatever it is they need to do, because you do not want to find them in some of those situations. Now, with that said, I think that there's also some other stuff that we have to address, some mindsets and some attitudes um, that I'm being seeing even among some of our colleagues. Um, that
Mhm.
is just straight up reprehensible. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
I don't know if I want to get into that here, but I do. I really
There,
do.
there,
Uh,
there is there. Well, yesterday I wasn't able to get on it,
I'm
but
not going
there
to
was
forget,
a
by the way.
Zoom.
I'm going to come back to it.
But there was a Zoom meeting from Orlin Johnson from the North America Division, Director of the Public Affairs of Religious Liberty, and Andre Wang. When they talked about immigration, what every Christian should know and can do. And so this
Mm.
was a legal, biblical, and practical webinar. It might be good, Raj. You know, you're the connector. I don't know if you can get some of these individuals maybe on for a pastors roundtable to talk about it, because again, they're talking about the legal, biblical, and practical steps that we can take to navigate through these current
Well, we can make a stab at it. I just want to share that if you go to the South Central Conference website, iamsouthcentral.org, and go to the multicultural page, we do have the documents that the Southern Union sent out, the kit that they sent out, and the NAD guidelines that they sent out. We do have those there and some other resources that we have shared with all of our pastors, and we have asked them to share it with their members because knowledge is power. You know,
Mhm.
a lot of the stuff that we think we know something. You know, one thing we've got to realize, and I'm just being honest, what we are seeing coming out of the White House is not something that is very plain. I mean, in other words, he said he was going to do this. They said they was going to do this, but we've got to realize it's a bait and switch. They are forcing us to get all hyped and worked up over one thing, and they're really doing something else. And we have got to be knowledgeable enough, not only in what's happening, but don't be. There's so much misdirection happening. All these executive orders are being sent out there to get our attention,
Wow.
to not allow us to see what's really happening. One of the orders took away the rights of civil rights protections that we have had for 60 years. One of the executive orders took care of that. We haven't said anything about that. We're not.
Yeah.
We're getting all worked up. Oh my God! Look what they did. They freeze the money for the funds, the federal funds going to
USA.
Pell Grant, and everyone's all excited about that. Now they reversed it. They reversed it very much, but it was such an uproar that governments, non-governmental organizations who are dependent on the funds,
Yeah,
they're
hold
in
on,
they're in
Raj.
an
Let's
uproar
talk
right
about
now.
that first one just a little bit. So what you're talking about is the revocation of the Equal Employment Opportunity Act, the EEOC.
Right.
Equal Employment Opportunity Act was something that arose out of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So,
Correct.
Title VII of the Civil Rights Act in 1964, and most of us in Black History Month, you ought to know what the Civil Rights Act and Title VII was about. But in that, out of that act, it was the next year, and I think it was 1965, that the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission was established. The
Hmm.
Equal Employment Opportunity Commission was established to protect the rights of the work rights for employment for people so that you could not be discriminated against based on your race, based on your gender,
Gender.
based
Mhm.
on your disability, based on your sexual preferences. And so those are the things that are being focused on. And so you
Right.
hear that this is part of this rollback of DEI. What people often forget is that the fifth part of that equal employment opportunity commission that they were to look after was that you could not be discriminated against because of your religion.
Religion.
And
There you
so
go.
for the last 30 years, when I've been writing letters, man, I'm that old. I've been pastoring, writing letters for 30 years. So for the last 30 years, when I write a religious liberty letter on behalf of a person trying to not have to work on the Bible Sabbath, or a student who's trying to not take a test on Sabbath, I
Mhm.
reference in that letter the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act and the EEOC Commission. Now, here's the problem with the commission. The commission in 1964 didn't have any power, didn't have any teeth. It was an advisory role. It was not until 1972 when the Equal Employment Opportunity Act was passed, which gave the commission authority to enforce the things that they were established to do.
Right.
And it was the act that the executive order said wipe that away. What does that mean? That means that no longer, when I write those letters now on behalf of a member who is trying to not have to work on Sabbath or not take a test on Sabbath, whatever, now it's back to the commission, who no longer has the same kind of teeth. They cannot go to court and argue for you or present a case in federal court on your behalf, which they could have done prior to this time. And so
Right.
we are seeing and all we've been hearing is DEI, DEI, DEI. And for a
Correct. Correct.
certain group of
Come
our
on,
people,
preacher.
when they hear DEI, all they're thinking is LGBTQ and transgender and all that kind of stuff. And they don't, and they're in their mind that triggers, we don't want men competing in women's sports, and they don't want books in our schools that are, we feel that we agree morally with that. But what's being thrown into all of that is also the religious liberty protections that you and I have as Sabbath keepers, that you and I have, not just religious liberty stuff, but also some civil liberty stuff in terms of
Right.
Black people and minorities and the women and the disabled. All of those protections wiped away.
Wow. Just like
The
that.
way. Just like that.
Signature.
Just like with a pen. And so that's why we could get all hyper and upset, but we have to have a plan. I appreciate Roland Martin. You know, he has a voice now, especially these days. He was speaking with someone about the boycott of Target. You know, everyone's going after Target based on the fact of what they said they were going to do after George Floyd, and now with the government saying it's all right to roll back DEI initiatives, they have also begun to roll back initiatives that were very supportive of minority businesses. And so there was one organization that said, "Hey, we're going to boycott Target. We're going to boycott." And his question was, "What's the plan? What's the plan?" As churches, I think we need to strategize. What is the plan for our community? You know, how far are we going to go? Are we just going to
Mm.
say, "Hey, we're going to give away food stamps or give away food," or where do we want to go? We have to take the next step. We have to be more than just
Yeah.
band-aid,
Yeah.
passing out band-aids. We need to do more, especially in a climate of which we find ourselves, where they are looking 5-6 years down the road. Too many times we only looking about the end of the year. A lot of what's happening now was put in place when the first administration of the president now, some of the things he is able to capitalize on now is because they were set up in the first administration. And so now it's like he's coming, he's gotten back in, and he's able to now initiate what has started then. Because all we thought about was, hey, we got 4 years and we're done. Now look at this, we got another 4 years. And so we've got to look down the road, look past the fact that he's causing us to cry. He's bringing about tension in our communities. We have to look down the road to see how we can strategize to better prepare our communities, not just our church. I think God's got this church. He's got it together. We have got to prepare our communities for what's to come and be ready for that. And we have to strategize.
I don't think our church is ready either, man.
My Lord.
I know that it feels good and nice to say that, and I do believe that God has His church and His people. But I don't. We listen when I listen to the amount of people who had issue with us talking about religious liberty, and for them, what they thought was politics in the pulpit prior to this election.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm very curious to see as people now begin to watch some of these things that we read about in these little red books for
Yeah.
ages, as they
Yes.
see them unfold. How can you, and knowing how some of our people either voted or did
Mhm.
not vote or did not believe in voting, Mike, you our people have become part of the problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it's
Mhm.
not, listen, it is not because of our theology. It is because of our praxis, not our theology is sound. Our theology says that we are to be the voice for the voiceless. That's what our theology says.
Yes.
Our theology says that we are to be the voice of judgment and to make sure that justice is. That's what our theology says. Our theology, even when it comes to Ellen White said, no, 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 no. Y'all aren't supposed to, just because you know something has been prophesied, you're not just supposed to sit back and let it happen. She says very pointedly, if you do this, this is not God's will. You are acting in opposition to God. If you see some danger coming and you choose to sit back, particularly in the realm of religious liberty and civil liberties, if you
Mm.
sit back and watch it happen and do nothing simply because you know that it has been prophesied that it will happen, then you are part of the problem. And God
Wow.
is not pleased with you. Listen, the text that we always lean on. What's the text? He has showed you, oh man, what is good,
Good.
Mhm.
Mhm.
and what does the Lord require of you?
Part of the.
But
Yeah.
to do justly and
This.
to love mercy. I find this text, and to walk humbly with your God. This text
Mhm.
is a problem text. You guys know that, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Talk
Because
to us.
Yeah.
Talk to us, please.
do justly and love mercy.
Mm.
Justice and mercy.
And
These are very opposing ideas.
yeah.
These
Yeah.
are opposite ends of the spectrum. Justice says you do the crime, you do the time. That's justice. You get what you deserve.
Right. That's right.
Mercy says it's the opposite of that. Mercy is, nah, you don't get what you deserve. I'm going to protect you from what you deserve.
Mhm.
Notice the language in the text. Do justice, do
Mm.
justly, but love mercy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
God is saying, look, even if you, and doing justly means in many cases for us, not just if you do the crime, you do the time, it means standing up and opposing injustice.
Right.
And God
Yeah.
in the text says, I don't care if you like it or not. I'm not asking you to love it. Love mercy, but do this. Do
Mm.
justice. Speak up for the people who have no voice. Stand up for the people who cannot stand for themselves. I'm telling you to do it. This is a theological, moral imperative imperative. It is not a suggestion. It is not a, he's saying, this is what I need you to do if you are going to represent me. I've told you what's required of you, and I'm requiring this of you. So the church does not have the luxury of being able to sit on the sidelines and simply say, well, because it's not my people, because
Come
it's
on.
happening to people
Come
that
on,
don't
preacher.
talk like me, don't eat
Talk
like
to
me,
us.
don't
Yes,
worship
sir.
like me, that I can just sit on the sidelines, keep my mouth shut, and mind my own business. God made it our business.
Come
And
on,
here's another
preacher.
thing, what we learned in last week's Sabbath school lesson, the wrath of God. Did you notice, you ever notice that the times when Jesus and God gets angry more than any for any other reason, it is in the face of oppression and injustice?
Come on,
And
preach.
that seems weird coming from a God who is omniscient. In other words, he knew that this mess was going to happen before it happens. And
Yeah.
yet, the most visceral, emotional pieces or expressions of God is when he sees injustice and oppression happen. Last Sabbath, editor of Message Magazine was with us at New Hope, and Carmela
Crawford.
Monk
Camilla.
Crawford, and she got up and she told this story. It was on crime and social justice. That was our intensive for the day, and she told this story, and I'm not going to forget this, but I got her. She says when she's reading the story of Jesus turning over the tables in the temple,
Mhm.
she got hung up on the doves, on the doves. When Matthew tells the story, he talks about, and when he saw the tables, the doves, he braided the whip and overturned the tables. And then in Mark says something about the doves. And she says, why the doves? Why? Because in the temple was a marketplace where they were selling sheep and
Yeah.
oxen and all this kind of stuff. But why the
Exchange
doves?
was the currency
Yeah.
exchange. Yeah.
She says, she brings this point out, and it's a powerful point. She says, because the Levitical code, the law reserved doves for the poorest
Poor.
of the people.
Poor
Mhm.
people.
The
Yes, sir.
people
Yes,
who
sir.
couldn't afford a sheep, the people who couldn't
Right.
afford a goat. They didn't have bullock and oxen money.
Right.
And
Right.
when Jesus saw the exchangers in the temple cheating the poorest of the people, the
Come
people
on, preach.
that ignited his anger like nothing else we see in scripture in the New Testament of Jesus getting angry when he sees the weakest of society being taken advantage of and being oppressed. That's when Jesus' anger is, and he becomes emotional and visceral. And so what's my takeaway? My takeaway was, we call ourselves Christians trying to be Christ like.
Come on, preach.
And if I'm going to be Christ like, then there's some emotion that must be called out of me when I see the least of these being taken advantage of, when I
Yeah.
see the least of these being oppressed. If I am truly going to be Christ-like, I do not have the luxury of just being able to sit on the sideline and twiddle my thumbs and say, "Oh
No,
well, guess they
can't do
deserved
it.
it."
Yeah.
Um,
Can't do
Yeah.
it. Can't do it.
I
We
believe.
are
I believe.
called.
I believe.
We are
I
called to
believe what
speak.
we're
Go
dealing.
ahead.
I was going to say, I believe these times, what we're facing right now, in light of what the government is doing, is actually opening up an opportunity for the smallest of our congregations to work in the community, to speak on behalf of those who need us to speak to. In the past, we would say, "Well, we don't have the resources, we don't have this, we don't have that." We don't need that now. We can join coalitions. We can even just open up our doors and have invite folks to come in and speak, to enlighten even just our congregations in understanding what's really going on. We can show those webinars that are being played now about these issues in our
Hmm.
in our groups, in our small groups. There are so many opportunities for us to join the fight, that if we
Yeah.
miss this opportunity, I don't know what God's going to do, but He will do something different, and we will not like it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen. I see the time is fleeting, fellas. It's
Yeah.
fleeting. But what I would say is that this is a time definitely to speak, because what we say as a church impacts people. There's a principle that I talked about a couple of weeks ago called the seventh generation principle.
Hmm.
And that basically is that it's a philosophy that emphasizes that the decisions we make today impacts future generations. And so a lot of companies go on that. So in other words, when they make decisions, they don't still make it for, here and
Right
now,
now.
but they're trying to make decisions for their children. And so I kind of use that dealing with Abraham. Abraham's call to go wasn't just for him, but it was for his children, right? And so there's a whole philosophy and theology that goes with that. But when we speak at these times, and as you were saying there so eloquently, Roger, if we sit back, that decision that we're making by not speaking up impacts our children. And again, we believe Jesus is coming soon. However, if the Lord says, okay, it's another 20 years or whatever it is, I don't know. God, I think it's sooner than that. But the decisions that we make now will impact that generation. Is going to impact. When they see us not saying anything, then maybe they'll say, well, they didn't say anything, I'm not going to say anything. And then you have a whole generation. Let's be isolated, separate from politics, and separate
So,
from being involved in
yeah,
community and civic
whole
act.
generations have disappeared because
Yes.
somebody did not speak up.
Space.
This is
Yes.
history. We know this. Whole generations have become extinct in places
Yep.
because
Voice is gone.
somebody and listen. I'm sorry for cutting you,
No, no, go
but
ahead.
there
Go ahead.
is a cost. No, make no mistake about it. There is a cost for speaking up. But the cost for silence is so much more expensive than the cost of speaking up. History shows that to us time after time after time after time when people just sat silent. And listen, there are going to be some people who are going to be persecuted beyond what you could imagine. But if we remain silent, it's not just about the physical persecution, and it's not just the calling out of the civil rights sins and the racism. It's not just when we talk about, and I want to make sure that our audience knows this. When we're talking about, at least when I'm talking about speaking up, it's not just that whole truth to power and just about that. There are times that a word to somebody on the subway or on the train, just about God's got this, God's got you, I'm praying for you, can I pray with you? Those are ways to speak up as well.
Hmm.
It's not necessarily always everybody called to speak up the same way with the same voice and with the same type of righteous indignation. Because when they come and get me and take me away and lock me up, there's got to be somebody left to keep on doing the work out there. So,
We need to fill the spot.
uh,
We need to fill the spot.
so
Hey, hey,
there's got to be
yeah,
some
yeah.
some give and take and some balance there because I know they're gonna come for me because I got to speak up and I got to call some stuff out.
Yeah.
But again, the cost of silence has always been greater than the cost of speaking up.
Listen, listen.
Listen.
As we land this
Oh,
plane,
go
as we
ahead.
land this plane,
Yes.
we have
Land the plane,
we've
Doc.
been
Land the plane.
silent.
Land the
We've been
plane.
silent long enough here at Pastors Roundtable, so we're just excited to be back together for season 10. Someone in the chat, Michael Michael Bob asked about suggestions. I'm going to challenge those who are viewing now, and those who will view later. Just drop in the chat. What are some of the things we can do as a church to not be silent?
Run for office.
Al Rogers talks about we're the Esthers. Each of us is an Esther.
And firing
You know,
everybody who ran for office. What in the world?
each of us, we are all the Esthers. We've got to realize that we can't wait for someone else to do it. It's up to us individually to say what we need to say, to challenge, even in our own families. There were families who, after the elections, were torn apart because they couldn't come together because the other side won, and it is tough when
Mm.
your family can't get together. But we've got to, as someone shared, put on our big underwear and get out there and speak up, because if we don't speak up, I don't know if I want to see a rock cry out. We
Yeah.
need to speak up,
Rocks are
and
not gonna cry for me.
challenge.
Yeah. Listen, I'm gonna say
I'm
one
going to
more
give.
thing, and
I want to.
I'm a dip out on
I
that.
want to share. I want each of you to, what is our call to action this week as we land this plane. My call to action is that we need to speak up. Whatever environment you're in, we need to speak up. We need to, even if it's a simple prayer, if it's we pray for our community, we pray for our jobs, we pray on the train, on the bus, as we're driving. We need to speak up on behalf of those who can't speak. That's my
Mhm.
challenge to each and every one today. Each of us have a challenge, and then we will land this plane.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Ansel.
I just want to say that you guys know that I'm a history buff, um, and as I look throughout the course of history, from a historical perspective, and I wrote this and made a post about this earlier in the week. From a historical perspective, this is what we know: voices of dissent and resistance have attracted only meager attention in the absence of consistent dissent and actual resistance. You heard what I
Mm,
said? Voices of dissent. So speaking up
Mhm.
is good, but voices of dissent and resistance have attracted only meager attention in the absence of consistent dissent. In other words, when what we feel is the moral crisis dissipates and seems to go away, and then we stop speaking and we're not really being consistent in our dissent.
Mhm.
Voices of
Come on.
dissent and resistance have attracted only meager attention in the absence of consistent dissent and actual resistance. So, getting up and marching, doing a march on a Martin Luther King's Day, that's not resistance. Y'all stop it.
No.
It's not.
Mhm.
Getting up and going out in the street and marching just because, I mean, every little bit may help, but somebody was asking about a plan. Like, there's got to be something more. Even in our churches, our stuff has become, our programs and our worship services have become so informational without any element in the design or structure to move it from
right.
becoming informational to transformational.
Right.
So we'll come and tell you about drugs and what they do to the community and this, that, and the other, but we don't have any drug programs to help anybody that's on drugs.
Ouch.
We
Ouch.
will go and tell you about you need to go and feed the homeless, and we'll tell you about how you need to be healthy, but we don't teach you how to cook. And so those are things that's like we've got to move from being simply a place where people to come to get information to
Mhm.
becoming places and communities where people can come for transformation. So, and if
And
not, then speaking up, yeah, it's got to be,
yeah.
we got to be consistent in our dissent, and then the resistance has to be real.
Right. I think
Pastor Dion.
my call to action, it comes from John chapter 21. So, I've been doing something for my devotion called the Gospel Blend, and that is taking the four Gospels and trying to read them in chronological order, right? And so I just completed. It took me like a couple months to do it, but I just completed it. And I'm in John chapter 21. And then a thought came to me because we're talking about speaking up, we're talking about making a change. There is a psychological process of change. Okay. So we're taking what's happening now in our society and we're like, what can we do? Like, what can happen? Like, we need to do something. Speaking up, what does that mean? Well, God brings us through this psychological process of change. So when he goes to Peter, and I did some research on this. God brings Peter through a psychological process of change. And I think that when we go through the psychological process of change, then we'll do something. First, he does this. There's confrontation and surprise. So something alarming happens. God sometimes brings something alarming to happen so that it causes us to be awake, right? And so for Peter, it was the big catch. Then there's this inner reflection, right? Peter is reflecting, Lord, what, and there's this big conversation that he has with Peter about, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? And then after that, there is this cognitive restructuring, right?
Mm.
And so the
Yeah.
cognitive restructuring now is reinterpreting our experience, right? And so what I'm saying is what God does so that we can make a profound difference. Because if we don't make a profound difference, there's something called the generational continuation of actions, which refers to us generations doing the
Vicious cycle.
same thing day in and day out because there is no
Vicious
change.
cycle.
So God brings us through this psychological process of change where there is now this reconstruction of cognitive restructuring, where now we reinterpret our experience, we reinterpret and our beliefs. Our beliefs now are matching up with our experience. Then now we are called to do something. And I'm saying to you all today, God is waking this country up. He is giving us the alarm. The alarm is out. Something different is happening. This is time for inner reflection. And by the
Mm.
grace of God, we can now have what I call the cognitive restructuring. I'm reinterpreting what I'm doing. I'm reinterpreting my beliefs. I'm reinterpreting how I process life. And then now we are agents for change.
My Lord. My Lord. Well, listen, as Karen Black shared, if we just look at the title, the issues that happened in the first 13 days, we have enough for the whole season. We are just so thankful that you joined us tonight. We started out with just wanting to just get off our chests what we've been going through, what we're seeing, just get into space, start to talk. Next week at the table, we're going to begin talking about ministry that is happening. We have a group leadership for the Cruise with a Mission. Cruise with a Mission. You do not want to hear how these young adults are getting involved in mission during their vacation time, and we want to show some of what we can be doing to help others that are less fortunate with that, along with some of the other things that we're planning to share this year. So join us next week at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central, as we have our second show of the 10th season here at the Pastors Roundtable, where we strive to make ministry relevant,
Resourced.
And real.
Good night,
Take
everyone.
care, everybody.